Hello and welcome. My name is Kyle, and this is How You Level Up, a podcast that decodes language to help you become your best self. Today we ask, what is the Antimemetics Division? We talked about memetics on the last episode, so it's only natural for us to discuss antimemetics now. What are antimemetics? Well, if memetics are distinct units of information, which we pass between each other, like germs or genes, then antimemetics are units of information that actively seek to be forgotten, or resist propagation. It's the inverse idea of memetic theory, and I didn't come up with it on my own. I was introduced to it through a book called There Is No Antimemetics Division. It was written by a pen name Quantum, QNTM. This book was originally published online through the SCP Foundation. It's a fictional organization featured in stories created by contributions on the SCP Wiki, a Wikipedia-type collaborative writing project. While the book, There Is No Antimemetics Division, is a work of fiction, there are some real-world examples that demonstrate antimemetic properties. Let's start off with the easy ones. Traumatic experiences and psychological repression almost certainly are antimemetic. They have antimemetic properties at both the individual and collective levels. When something is tense, our minds create a barrier to protect us. We forget that which is so extreme as a means to save our sanity. Not all trauma needs to be big T trauma for our minds to want to forget it. For example, if your parents were kind to you and didn't beat or hit you, you might consider yourself lucky. Yet, what if they couldn't do something else for you growing up? Like they never said I love you, or they didn't hug you, or they weren't able to hold your emotions. You might want to forget that your parents couldn't do those things. Your dad was really nice, but he never said I love you. That hurts. Your mom was gentle, and you watched her criticize everyone around you. That's a hard standard to reach. These examples are not necessarily unique. Emotional intelligence is not a guarantee in our parents. It takes work, and many don't know where to start. To think our parents were not the best parents is an antimemetic thought in nature. We don't want to think our parents or guardians were unable to meet our needs as children. This could also apply to a partner. Regardless of who the person is you're thinking about in relation to you, if you don't want to believe a thing, the memory of a data point will degrade over time. Another good example of antimemetic information is statistical context and base rates. Don't let me lose you here, okay? The number of hurricanes in the eastern United States has remained relatively the same in quantity across the last 100 years. I have a link in the description if you want to click on it. Our tools for measuring hurricanes increases, and we continue to build near the coastline. Is it that hurricanes are getting worse over time, or are we setting ourselves up for disaster? Is this boring you to death already? Have you clocked out yet because we're touching on statistics? Watching news stories about rare events like plane crashes, terrorist attacks, lottery winners are memorable and emotionally resonant. While the statistical likelihood of this event, any of these events, which would provide a crucial perspective, is forgotten and never absorbed. It's as if the intensity of these events is the reason why we remember them so vividly. A little bit different from some of that trauma that we were talking about a moment ago. It's almost like the two ends of a spectrum, with traumatic experiences being repressed. It's almost like the two ends of a spectrum, with traumatic experiences being repressed and then statistically unlikely events being so front and center. We could explain this with our cognitive bias towards the negative and wanting to protect ourselves. Negative events are more memorable so that our subconscious can try to avoid them. And if they're not too negative, or they are too negative, we tend to forget them. Speaking of broadcasted events, what about retractions and corrections? Of course, I'm talking about the media. These are antimemetic. Original false information spreads widely, rapidly, and sticks on our memories, while corrections, even prominent ones, fail to achieve the same reach or memorability. Retractions are so antimemetic in nature that even after hearing about a retraction, we deny its validity. There's a website called Retraction Database. I've got the link in the show notes, where you can search for retracted scientific papers by the author's name. Retractions by mainstream media fly under the radar because why would a media outlet want to broadcast their mistake? They want to be perceived as the quote-unquote news, not the quote-unquote strongly opinionated. To be a political party of peace and call for attacks on opposing views? To be the party of peace and enter a war? These don't align with the narrative. To be the party of the people and then have lots of information come to light about massive donations? No. Let's ignore that for now. The most coherent argument for understanding antimemetics is that information exists in relations. Information exists between people. So just as our biological systems have evolved mechanisms for forgetting, like the pain of giving birth, like the immune system tolerance or neural pruning, our cultural systems develop antimemetic functions as regulatory mechanisms. Antimemetics aren't failures of transmission. They could, in fact, be evolutionary adaptations that serve important functions in information ecosystems like the public sphere. So let's actually now talk about the book. There is no Antimemetic Division. There were some really cool ideas. I thought it was a fantastic book. And I want to share some of those ideas which hit home with me. Antimemetics, the way that you experience antimemetics, is because they are forgetful. The way to remember an antimemetic object or an idea is by what they are not. There is a memory technique where you can remember anything by explicitly noting what distinguishes itself from everything else, meaning what is it not. This is called negative definition or contrastive learning. The idea of knowing a thing by what it is not. It's something I want to touch on later with specifics. It's a concept of questioning around a thing to understand that which is unknown. I also notice that when I'm reading fiction books, sometimes I get to a point in the story where I cannot remember what previously happened and I need to go back and read it. Like, how did I miss that small piece of information? How do I make sense of this? Well, when you've read enough fiction, sometimes you brush off the confusing parts of the author's language because you know it's going to be revealed in time. And indeed, it is revealed in time, and then you're like, oh my God. But only now, when reading this book, there is no antimemetic division. Am I recognizing that maybe the author wants the reader to be confused? Duh, of course, Kyle. Maybe the author wants the reader to not understand because this is the point in the plot that is antimemetic, meaning the author needs you to forget this point and then feel surprised when the confusion is clarified later on. I thought that was really cool. There was a quote that said, "Ideas don't die." I like this quote in the book. It's not a new quote for me, I just simply liked it a lot. Can we connect this idea to concepts not dying, to something in memetic theory? Sure. We could also connect it to the concept of ideas not dying because we name a thing and all other possibilities are destroyed. Yeah, we touched on that last time. There's a quote in the book from one of the chapters, and I want to repeat the quote. "The realm where most problems were solved was by saying the correct words." This is a through line in a lot of my evergreen episodes, where changing the way that you say something will change the impact of your words, will change the way that reality is perceived. We're all on this earth trying to figure out the right words to get what we want. This what we want is not a selfish thing, it's just a thing that all living organisms do. We desire, we strive, we see a way of living that looks enjoyable and we want to go after it. That really hit home with me. In the same chapter, there was another quote that I want to read. And it says, "We weren't the foundation at first." The first Antimemetics Division was a U.S. Army project. It ran parallel with the Manhattan Project during World War II. We called ourselves the Unthinkables. It began as an experiment in advanced propaganda. The objective was to cut through the physical conflict and find a way to rupture ideological machines, to obliterate the idea of Nazism. After 2 years, enough theory had been developed that the task had then been reduced to an engineering problem. We didn't understand how far ahead you need to think when you're working with this kind of technology. Now, this idea of antimemetics being an advanced propaganda machine, this is interesting. So before getting into the question of why would a government want to find a way to influence the general population to believe a thing that is not in their best interest, let's touch on antimemetics being advanced propaganda. And I do want to come back to that question. I talked about propaganda in a previous episode, episode 127. We've actually talked about it a number of times. So I'm going to reuse the working definition that I had in that episode, which is that propaganda is a form of communication used to influence people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors toward a particular ideology, cause, or position. Propaganda operates by employing emotional appeals, demonizing an enemy, half-truths, and outright lies. With this working definition, there is not a single mainstream media outlet which isn't pushing propaganda. And this is the thing about antimemetics. Mainstream media calls themselves the news. If they reported the news as it was, it would be dry data, uninteresting, like the play-by-play of an event from a video camera or the accounting report that puts you to sleep. There would be no story to twist because the truthful news of what is not as interesting as what is this about. The news would be fact-based rather than story-based, with a hero and a villain, and there always is a hero and a villain. Some quick heuristics of knowing there is an opinion entering the news gives you the space to ask yourself, is there a hero in this story? Is there a villain in this story? If the answer is yes, then a veil of judgments has been laid over facts. The troubling part of sharing the news as facts-based is that we, the general population, are lazy. We don't want to think. We outsource our thinking constantly on a conscious level and on a subconscious level. Consciously, the use of AI is outsourcing our thinking. The use of an assistant is outsourcing administrative tasks. The use of firefighters is outsourcing thinking about how to fight fires. Why do those things when I can have someone else do them for me? This makes us a more productive society as individuals. There's lots of good reasons for outsourcing. So we do it. On a subconscious level, that's what a heuristic is. It's the outsource of thinking to a framework that you already understand. Why work through the mental model of saying, is this person bad because of X, Y, or Z? Just use the heuristic that says X, Y, or Z is bad when done by A people and not by B people, because B people believe what I believe and therefore are more likely to be good. Why veer off about outsourcing when talking about propaganda? Because the work to figure out if an event is aligned with your beliefs is work. It's work. And we don't want to work. We want to think less, to save our cognitive energy, so we let others think for us and tell us what's happening. We allow them to think for us and tell us what we should feel and believe. Outsourcing. Your thinking is not bad, you just need to be aware of it. Antimemetics is advanced propaganda in that there isn't a single mainstream media outlet which isn't pushing propaganda. The news is not the news. It's propaganda. We call the news and thus we forget every time, like an anti-meme, that it is not the news. To share that the news is propaganda means the news is not the news. So I say this and I sound repetitive, and yet I don't know if anyone ever believes it. Because if they did, we'd stop watching the news. To remember an anti-meme is to remember a thing by what it is not. Most news is not dry truth. So back to the question I asked 2 minutes ago or so. Would a government want to find a way to influence the general population to believe a thing that is not in their best interest? This question, it pertains to what I said about knowing a thing by what it is not. That by asking questions around an object, we understand the shape of the object and then can begin to understand more about the object itself. Any government, all governments, are organizations. They're made up of people. Any organization has an incentive. An organization has a collective desire. Sometimes the collective desire is not aligned with an individual's desire. This does not stop an individual from supporting an organization's incentive, so long as, along the way, the individual is rewarded. It would not be surprising to hear the majority of people working for an organization that they don't like. It would not be surprising to hear this is the norm. It would not be surprising because we know what an organization is by asking around what an organization wants. Like, how does an organization function? What happens if a single individual in an organization is replaced? The organization continues on. What if many individuals in an organization are replaced? The organization continues on, maybe shifting lanes, though it continues nonetheless. And what about linchpins? Somebody who's pivotal to an organization. What if they're replaced? Well, linchpins are important people, essential to function and efficiency. So if a linchpin is replaced, would an organization be stopped in its tracks in terms of achieving its objective? Maybe. Maybe replacing linchpins is not a 1-to-1 ratio. Maybe it's like a 3 or a 4 or a 5-to-1 ratio where you need to hire 5 people to replace them. Yet the organization continues. Governments are nation-state organizations. Local representatives are replaced and the government continues to function. Senators are replaced and the government continues to function. Presidents and their cabinets are replaced and the government continues to function. What is the goal of a government? What is the goal of any individual or organism? To feed, to reproduce, to live. Does a government want to represent its people? Yes, if representing its people means the government is fed. Fed with what? Fed with the sustenance that drives the organic functions of an organization like a government, energy and time, in the form of human capital. Power is the form of defensive measures and attacking capital. What is the reproductive path of a government? To reproduce its ideology? Maybe. To increase its longevity? For a government is made up of people, and people are replaced, and still the government remains intact. Would such a government, would such an organization, would such an organism seek to influence the general population to believe a thing that is not in their best interest? If it meant feeding, if it meant reproduction, if it meant continued life, the answer is invariably yes. It took energy to get here, energy we, individuals, must actively produce. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to think about this because consciously, subconsciously, we must and desire to conserve energy. Thus, the idea does not want to be shared. Thus, we forget the dry truth. In another chapter of this book, there was another quote I want to repeat, that an anti-meme can sometimes be so powerful that you have to have a containment sphere where you can go in, learn, plan, organize, and when you leave the containment sphere, you have to forget what you planned inside. I feel as though podcasts, long-form conversations are like this. This is why writing is also so powerful, and why when our culture veers away from long-form thinking, by not reading books, by not having long conversations with friends where disagreements are okay, we lose our ability to step into that containment sphere and contemplate anti-memes, to think about the things that exist that we constantly forget. In another part of the book, there's this thing called mnestics, and they're drugs to help you remember the unrememberable. I thought that was a really cool idea. And so I thought about it a little bit. Ask a person who has never taken psychedelics and a person who has taken psychedelics. Are all people connected? You'll never receive a no from a person who has taken psychedelics. You might receive a no. I don't know what the percentage is, but you might receive a no from someone who has not taken psychedelics. Psychedelics have nestix properties. Tribalism, the natural occurring defensive desire of an organism to live on and reproduce against its competitors, indirectly informs us that not all people are connected. Tribalism tells us that we need to other others. Psychedelics dissolve tribalism. Psychedelics help us remember the unrememberable, that all of humanity is connected. You can know this without psychedelics. You'll never not know it with psychedelics. In this same chapter in the book, they say ideas can be killed. And the character says, how? And the response that is said is with better ideas. It's such a classic line of how do you beat bad ideas with better ideas? And this comes in the form of conflict, daring conversation that is uncomfortable to have and explore. I bring this up only to say conflict is not inherently bad. It's a disagreement. It's a misunderstanding of objectives, of alignments, of positions, rather than how can we expand the pie? How can we make sure that everybody here comes out winning, even if a little bit? There is more in the book. There is no antimemetic division that I really enjoyed, but these ideas I wanted to touch on, talk about, and share with you because talking about an idea by what it is not, or talking around an idea by what it is not, asking questions about not what is a thing, but what isn't a thing. This ability for us to have negative definitions or contrastive learning. I really liked it. I thought it was awesome. And so let's wrap up this episode by saying that there's a lot of really cool ideas out there, and they're not all going to be inside of nonfiction books where we're drilled with some new concept or we're told that there's this new model that you can apply and your life will be perfect, or at least better. Sometimes you just need to jump into a story and think about what that story means to you, even if it is a complete fabrication. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I wish you a great day ahead, or a good night. Thank you for listening to How You Level Up. If you're enjoying the show, subscribe and give a 5-star rating. There are new episodes each month asking questions about timeless communication lessons. Language is a medium for sharing, and the knowledge unpacked here can be applied to anyone, anywhere, facing any challenge. If there's a question or topic you'd like me to dive into next, send a note to any of my connected social media accounts. This is all about how you level up.